Hi, Kim. Hello. We'll get started in just a minute, everyone. We can't hear the audio. Somebody put their, can we not hear? Let me see a head shake if we can't hear the audio. We can't hear? We cannot hear. Can we test that out? 1 minute. Let's give it 1 minute. We're going to test the audio. If you can hear me, put your thumb up. We see, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we can hear. We can hear. If I could get some little heart emojis or somebody thumbs up, if we make sure we all can hear. Hi, everyone. We're just getting ready to get started. Hi, Jamie. Thank you. I see a lot. Hi, John. Hi, Carl. Lots of thumbs up. Okay. Wonderful. So, hi, everybody. Welcome in. I think we can get started now. I'm Jennifer. It is the 3rd of September. If you don't know that reference, Google it. It's the Temptation song. I will not bore you with my singing, but I have been thinking about that line all day. And there's a very popular Temptation song that starts out that way. So hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer. I'm the Executive Director for Amputee Aid. Welcome to another session of Life Amplified. This is our weekly webinar, Wednesdays at 2 o'clock right here on Zoom. We get together. It's in part entertainment, in part informal, in part formal, always educational, and here to serve all of you, whether you are in the limb loss and limb difference community or you are, like me, a supporter. Usually Carl is here, and he's not. As you can see, we have a different guest, which is Chihuahua Carl in his chair. Carl is on Zoom today, though, and he is recovering at home from his surgery, his osseointegration surgery. Near the end of our webinar, we're going to invite him in to talk a little bit about that experience and then preview our webinar for next Wednesday at 2 o'clock, where we are going to talk in detail with Carl about his osseointegration surgery, how it went, whether it met his expectations, how his recovery is going, and we'll be able to answer questions from all of you as well. So if you're here live and you want to know more about that, please attend next Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time here on Zoom. And if you are watching the recording, hello, all of you on YouTube land, you are invited as well to attend live. And if you can't, you can always email us your questions to ask Carl in advance. Our email address is info@amputee-aid.com. So for all of you joining live, hi, good to see you all again. And thank you for spending your next hour-ish with me and with Chihuahua Carl in his chair. He's just as adorable, but not as talkative. So you're just going to hear from me today. But we have a special guest who is Kim. Hi, Kim. Kim, we asked to join us today so that we could talk more about her experience as an author and blogger and spend some time talking about how she got into this role and some of the pieces that she's written. So, hi, Kim. Nice to see you. And thank you for being my guest / co-host / co-entertainer for Life Amplified today. How are you?
I am doing great. It's another sunny, cool day here in Indiana, and I'm enjoying it. I feel like we're getting spoiled, and then we're going to have like weird weather or something.
Yes, let me, for those of us in cold weather states, we know this. This is the psych out warm before it gets cold again, and fall just smacks you in the face, and then winter's right behind that. John, I know you're from Pennsylvania. Jamie in Illinois, you get it as well. This is like the last ditch of beautiful sun before 8 months of cold. And so for those, if you are joining us live, if we don't know where you are from, put it in our chat so we know. And if you're watching the YouTube recording of this, please tell us where you're from. It's helpful to me to know our footprint and where we're reaching out to. So tell us where you're from. And Kim, you are on the hot seat. I have lots of questions for you, but everyone, as per usual, this is a discussion-oriented webinar. So if you have questions that you would like to ask Kim, you can interject. You don't have to have your camera on if you don't want it on. You can raise your hand if you don't want to interject. If you just want to put it in the chat, Nick, who's behind the camera, and Angie, who's our Director of Operations behind the camera, will chime in and read those as we go along, okay? So Kim, tell us, you said you're from Indiana. Give us a little bit of a background for who you are, and if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about your story as an amputee, just to kind of set the context for what we're going to discuss today.
Okay, back in 2010, I had just taken on a temporary job. I was a divorced single mom, and my son had just left for college, and I was like, okay, now I can start my career. No. cancer hit that summer. I started developing a tiny spot on my foot that ended up being about the size of a golf ball, like it had been cut in half and slapped on the side of my left foot. And we saw a foot doctor who had no idea what it could be, but sent me for an MRI. He went off to Japan on vacation, and then another doctor said, well, you have a mass wrapped around your ankle too.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, cancer was still not on my radar at the moment. And then, after lots of doctor visits and trying to work this job and everything, I find out you have cancer. It's spreading up your leg past your ankle. And now we're going to have to amputate to save your leg.
I have a question for you, Kim. I have a question for you on that point. I think this is helpful for people who are watching the recording and maybe, are experiencing something like this. At the time when you first went to the doctor and they said, well, there's a mass on your here as well. Did the topic of cancer ever come up? Like you said,
you froze.
Oh, did I freeze a little bit? Am I good now?
You freeze. You're freezing.
Okay, let me try again. Did the topic of cancer ever come up with those initial doctor's appointments, or was it well after the fact that the topic of cancer came up?
I don't know what you're saying. I'm
sorry. Is anyone else having connectivity issues, or is it just between me and Kim? Put a thumbs up if you can hear me, and maybe we can hear John's hands up. So, I see thumbs going down. I see some thumbs going up. Some thumbs going down. Let's see if we can fix that. So, yeah, I hear some can't hear you, Jennifer. I hear some people saying that they can't hear us. I wonder, we're going to fix that right now. Everybody pause, don't go anywhere, because I got more jokes to crack, but lots of important things to share with Kim too. So just hold on a second so we can see what the connectivity issue is. And Nick's going to look at that for us. Do you have any idea, Nick, what's going on there? We don't. Okay, stay tuned, everybody. Hold for a moment. We're going to try to fix this right now. And I'll check too. Maybe we're just having a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue.
It's working now.
It is? Okay. Did the Wi-Fi just want to take a break for us? Okay. Well, nobody move. Everybody stay where you are and don't affect the internet gods, okay, or get them mad at us again. So Kim, what I was saying, and I don't want to interrupt you too much, but I think your story is helpful for people who might be watching the recording. Maybe they have something similar where they have a mass somewhere and they're just starting to get treated. Did the topic of cancer come up early on, or was it much later that the topic of cancer came up?
It was later.
Later.
Because they really didn't know what was wrong with my foot, just as going to the foot doctor. But when they sent me to get the MRI and another doctor here in town and read it, then they decided, let's send her to an orthopedic surgeon in Indianapolis. And so from that point on, that's where they suggested it could be cancer, but they weren't sure. So we did a biopsy. It was continuing to grow very quickly.
Oh, wow.
To the point where I put a shoe on that foot. A lot of people are misdiagnosed when it's really some kind of sarcoma cancer. And that's what mine is, synovial sarcoma, a very rare type of cancer. Only 1% of people nationally actually fall under some type of sarcoma. There's 60 subtypes of both the soft tissue and the bone kind. Wow. But yeah, up until, I just tried not to think about it until they finally said it could be cancer, but I still didn't think until they said you have cancer and we can't save your foot.
And I'd imagine because of its rarity, you didn't know, there was nobody in your family or someone like a friend who had that experience. So in some ways, were you kind of going through this alone, at least with respect to the actual experience? Was there anyone that you could connect with who could tell you this is what it's going to be like, here's what you should expect?
No, actually, because I live in a smaller city that's northeast of Indianapolis. So, we have more, not really rural, but like a smaller hospital. We have 2 smaller hospitals here, and the doctors really, even the cancer wing, I found out, most of the doctors have not dealt with sarcoma patients. So I ended up going to IU Simon Cancer Center, and But still, I felt alone because nobody could tell me anything about this particular type of cancer that I had developed. And I had to do all the research kind of myself until I could talk to the doctors and find out.
Yeah.
We never did find out what causes it, although there's other types of cancer in my family, just not anything related to what I had.
So how many months or years from the date of diagnosis was it before you had your amputation surgery?
Well, I noticed the bump in May on the side of my foot. That's when I started this new full-time job, which I really loved. It was kind of a temp job that would eventually turn into full-time, I had hoped. And it just started to, every week, it got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And it was starting to feel like I had plantar fasciitis in my left foot. Because the moment I hit the floor, it was like very painful. And it was because it was cutting off the blood supply to my foot. And one day I woke up and the whole entire foot is purplish black all the way up past my ankle. I felt something pop the night before. So apparently it pushed a vein and just, ruptured. And it was growing and I was getting concerned. That's when I finally went to a foot doctor and everything. And no, there wasn't anybody around me that could tell me what was going on or explain it or anything. They were just, I had 6 nurses in there going, we have no clue. We've never seen anything like this before. They're all calling in and each nurse and going, look at this foot,
Yeah, which I imagine is in some ways frustrating because you're there to get answers and to get help, and you're being told, oh, I've never seen this before. That can't feel good. And I'm sure many of you on the webinar have had similar experiences, where you're not getting the answer. You don't want to be the guinea pig. You're there to get help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do know that at Ivy Simon, they're a teaching hospital. So I had doctors, my surgeon, who I still see to get my prosthetic stuff. He did know about sarcoma and he put me with a sarcoma oncologist specifically for that. But still, I had to do a lot of research on my own. I found sarcoma Facebook pages, asked a lot of questions. But the other thing is I had no idea what an amputation was going to entail.
I see.
So in a sense, I was like cancer and amputation.
Double whammy.
I don't know what to do and nobody knows anything about it. Yeah. So that's where I was that summer and then in August is when I was told that I would need the amputation and it happened pretty quickly after that. So.
Did you have anyone in your family who had been living with limb loss or limb difference, or would this have been a new experience for you as well?
My mom's got a brother that was born in the early 60s with no real feet below his kneecap. Like he had just it was that drug that they took in the 60s for nausea and it caused all kinds of deformities, I guess. So I remember him as a child wearing the legs, and he led a full life. He got married, had kids, all that worked. But I never saw him without his legs.
I see.
He always wore pants. So I really wasn't exposed that much to him.
Sure. Now, you had mentioned, and here's where I wanted to kind of center our conversation today, that you did a lot of research and to learn about this, to start, whether it was sarcoma or amputee groups or what questions to ask. And that knack, it seems like you have a knack for research, has kind of led into what you do now, which is a lot of blogging and writing. True?
Yeah, because I'm not only just sharing my story. Mine is only a small example of what thousands and thousands of people deal with on a daily basis, that it's like the public has no clue. So, when I talk to non-disabled or people that's not familiar with amputation, cancer, and all of that, it's like I feel like I have to educate them. Like I should have a doctorate degree at this point after 15 years. But, and I do try to keep up with what is it, because my cancer came back 4 more times. So the other form of tumors in like the groin or the stump and stuff like that in the first 7 years. And then technically I'm cancer free. There are spots on my lungs, but we don't think it's cancer kind of thing.
Okay,
but still,
open for that.
The last time I was doing chemo, they were like, we're at odds. What if this comes back? We don't know how to treat this anymore. So I'm hoping that with all the new technology, the new stem cell, all those things, maybe if it were to come back, there would be something that they could do that didn't require taking more chemo.
Yeah, well, I hope for you as well. And despite that and the doctor's appointments that you have and kind of this lingering issue, you spend a lot of time blogging and sharing stories and advocating for your community. So first, tell us, where do we find you? I know you've written articles for Amputee magazine, one of which we shared on our social media, but you have other places that you write for as well.
Yes, I have my story on Gilead Ministries, which is an organization I volunteer for. They supported me through all of my cancer journeys. They're here in Indiana, in Marion, and they've been doing that for 25 years. I also, out on a limb on WordPress is me. You'll see my little owl up in the corner. It's kind of a play on words.
Limb.
Being out on, and I'm taking a chance at exposing myself to society. There could be criticism, there could be positivity. You never know what to expect in the AI world or anything else, social media these days. But I just feel like I want to help I'm surrounded by people that need help. And even though, like I said, I don't have two nickels to rub together, but that's okay because I have a heart. That's what I was born to do. I feel that God allowed me to be alive so that I can continue to fight for everyone, not just myself. And so the blogging, I have a friend who does travel blogging. So last year, I obtained a scholarship and attended the Midwest Travel Writers Conference. And I just thought, I want to be an accessible travel writer, someone who can tell what it's like to travel from being disabled. Is this place really disabled friendly just for one person or for everyone across the board? What level is it? What could they improve? All of this. And since I have a journalism degree and a journalism background, I thought, why not? And when I had a vehicle, I don't right now, but when I had a vehicle, I was able to, I started going to the museums, the state parks that say they were handicap accessible. And, writing about the good experiences, but also sharing, that chair that I wanted to try out, the electric ATV wheelchair at the state park, was not plugged in the night before. It is not charged. So therefore, I cannot do this, things like that. So it's kind of a little bit of everything.
I want to come back in a moment to this accessible travel issue because and ask some questions for the group. But if we can just back up for a moment, because, I always marvel at people who can write blogs and write articles and get them published like you. You mentioned your background is you have a journalism degree. Is that right? So this is something that you like to do, or at least evidently enough to get a degree in it. True?
Yeah, I went back as a divorced single mom when my son was 9 and I was 31, and it's like it was a time of a recession during that time.
Sure.
Here. And the places that I had been working, you just couldn't find a job. So I thought, you know what, I'm going back to school. I've already had some experience writing. So I will go and get the degree. And that's what I was working on right before the cancer struck, was to getting a public relations or whatever kind of position. I have a lot of nonprofit experience. I have a lot of background in those kinds of things, but I wanted to combine my ability to do PR with my ability to write and my degree. So even though I don't get paid to do any of this stuff other than for Amplitude, by the way, the new Amplitude has one of my articles in it.
Yes, everyone take a look. We posted it on our social media, but everybody go take a look at our friend Kim.
Yeah. So, and I would love to do a follow-up to that article too, because things went from bad to worse with Medicaid and Medicare. And they cut me off all the stuff. But you know what? I'm a fighter. I will keep getting up and I will keep moving forward and finding out ways that I can survive, but also thrive. No matter what happens.
Kim, I promise we'll come back to the accessible travel issue in a moment, but since we're on the topic of topics, how do you come up with topics that you want to blog about or write for Amputee magazine?
Being on all the support groups that I'm on, I hear all kinds of issues, so I take notes. Sometimes, like, I'll write down, this might be an issue that other people might want to know about, like dealing with Medicaid or traveling or whatever. So I have a little notebook that I just jot some words down if I hear something that sounds good. And then also I read all the time, like not just books, but magazines and everything. And I have conversations with people. I do better talking to strangers than I do anyone else. But, it's just, I don't know. I've always been like that. I was like, I guess I'm a good listener, maybe an eavesdropper sometimes.
Sure. So and sometimes you interview other amputees or other people living with limb difference for part of your article. Have you interviewed anybody on our webinar? Because some of these folks know you, but have you or would you be willing to interview anybody in our webinar?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I used to do radio. That's something else I did briefly while in college, and I loved it because, for one, I was an introvert. Nobody had to stare at my face, but now I'm past that. But yeah, I love hearing other people's stories. My job when I used to write for newspapers and websites and magazines was to interview and tell other people's stories because I feel like people don't think their stories are important, but everyone's story is important. Matter. One little glimmer can be in there that might spark something in somebody that needed to hear it.
Yes.
So
yes, that is such a beautiful thing to say. So if you are interested in being interviewed by Kim, share your information. And if you don't feel comfortable putting in the chat, just email us separately and we'll share it to her. And Kim, one thing I often think about is, and let's talk about this in the context of the accessible travel topic, is getting the perspective from different types of amputees and people living with limb difference. So for example, accessible travel for someone who is below the knee amputee would be probably different than someone who's above the knee or is at the hip or someone who is an arm amputee. And so I think sometimes there's this overgeneralization about accessible travel for amputees as a whole, when for those of you living in the community, your insights and perspectives are different based on the type of amputation you have. True? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So no, I was going to say, let's talk about that and maybe talk a little bit about some of the issues that you have found or problems, maybe is a better word, when you're writing about accessible travel. What are like the top things that you encounter or that you write about for the amputee community?
I can guarantee you I've got a lifetime of journals.
Sure.
On my experience. Just going shopping alone. Most of us can't afford to buy an electric scooter, or let alone to try to figure out how to carry it around in the back of our vehicle, especially I'm single. I can't lift that thing up and put it in the back or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you go to the store and those electric scooters, there may be one or two. Yeah. Maybe more. But they're broken down, they don't run very well, they die, the batteries constantly die, so they never really charge well, those kinds of things. People just want to get out and shop. And what do I hear from managers when I say something about getting it fixed? Well, you can always shop online. No, I want to get outside and see people go shopping and pick out my own stuff, Yes. I don't really care to shop online that much. But, or if you go to the parks, I'm always looking for, where is that handicap spot? Why is it clear over there when it needs to be over here? Because maybe someone can't walk that far. An elderly person, someone who's in a wheelchair. And I help pick out, there's a local state park here, Mounds State Park, where I live. And a few years ago, part of the Friends of the Mounds group, I helped choose a four-wheeler that anyone can they leave their driver's license or ID with us. They can take it all the way down to the main attraction, which is all flat road. And they build a deck so you can ride right up on the deck and be right in the middle of the large Indian mound and get to enjoy it. And we're going to have to replace that because it's almost 10 years old. But just the idea that people just don't think about that. I think they need to have more of us on all these building opportunities.
Yes.
Like we're going to build a new building or we're going to create a new park. Well, how about putting some handicapped people from all different walks of life?
Yes.
Commit,
Yes, that's a great point. So here in the city of Pittsburgh, there is a planning committee for a new neighborhood development. and they asked for folks from the non-able-bodied community to participate. So I signed up in part to creep on what's going on and to know from the Amputee Aid perspective, but they asked me questions as if I were part of your community, and I felt very uncomfortable about that, to be candid with you, because I can speak about what our nonprofit does, but I don't have your lived experience. That, and Kim, you're touching on something that I think you wrote about in a recent blog, which is shifting your mindset. So I want to go back. You mentioned at the grocery store, someone saying in an incredibly insensitive and marginalizing way, but maybe with good intent, you can just shop online, as if that's the solution. And I get that that's a solution, but it's very marginalizing, kind of puts you in a position of being homebound. And one thing that you wrote about in a recent blog is kind of getting people to think or reorient their thinking around the disability community. Can you talk a little bit more about that and about that blog in particular?
Yes, I actually have it printed out.
Wonderful. And this is the one that if those of you want to read it, you would go to the Out on the Limb blog, correct?
Out on a Limb.
Okay.
Yeah. You just go to WordPress and put in Out on a Limb in my name and it'll come up, or I put it in the chat too.
Yeah.
But, we're being minimalized and dismissed. Like, how dare you ask for, the smallest thing or whatever, when really every single one of those non-disabled people might be on our side one day. They might have something happen. We're all going to get older. And when if we live to long enough, we are going to need to use certain resources that disabled people have been using all along. Mm-hmm. So, when someone says it could be worse, or at least you have the other leg, which I hear a lot, or you still have two legs. No, that's not a real leg. That is pretty much me walking on a stilt on one side. Mm-hmm. Things like that. And, they just automatically assume that you guys can still, you got a prosthetic, you're fine. No, we deal with all kinds of things.
Right.
Blisters, swelling, all kinds of things, terrible fit, sweating.
Infection.
Every day talent for us. And I have to explain to my friends, you don't see that challenge because I don't let you see that challenge, and I don't talk about it because you're always wanting me to talk positive. Well, that's fine. I can be positive. But if I say this thing is hurting and I need to take my leg off, I don't want you to get offended.
Yeah.
These kinds of, there's that toxic positivity, comparisons to one amputee to another.
Yes.
No two amputees are alike.
Yes. I want to pause there for a moment because I want to talk about this concept of toxic positivity that we've touched upon in prior webinars. Before I do that, Kim, for those of you attending our webinar live, I would like you to think about, and if you're comfortable, either share or put in the comments, a time that you've been told something or offered something that to you felt very marginalizing. Maybe the person intended it to be helpful, like it could be worse, or you can walk that far, but it was actually harmful or marginalizing to you. If you've experienced that, which I'm sure you have, please, we'd like to share so other people are aware of this. It teaches those of us who are able-bodied what's appropriate and what's not appropriate to say. If you don't want to say it live, you can put it in the comments and we'll read it. So Kim, on this topic of toxic positivity, because this is something that bothers me, and for everyone who works with me who's behind the screen right now, they know I talk about it a lot. Imagery, the buff, marathon runner, amputee, no problems, everything is fine. Like it in some ways is inspirational, but in many other ways sets an expectation or a standard that's not attainable for some people and ignores the reality of being an amputee. So talk about that, because I talk about it all the time. We could go on and on and on. Talk to us about what you mean by toxic positivity and how that was present, or what you discussed in your blog about that.
I can tell you, when I first developed cancer and I told everybody, hey, I'm going to lose part of my leg and my foot because of this cancer, it was like, first they'll act sad, but then they'll be like, oh, but think about how this will save your life. And you don't know. We can't predict what's going to happen in the future. So when you're in the middle of something, you want somebody just to let you feel what you feel at that moment, because that's the only way you're able to process it and get on. But if you try to talk me out of what I'm feeling at the moment, which is scared or sad or depressed or whatever it is on a specific issue, then it can be very frustrating. And even at church, I get that too. I've seen it happen to other people. It's like nobody is comfortable with what you're telling them, so it's easier to try to cheer you up. Well, I don't want to be cheered up at that moment. I want to be allowed to
feel your feelings.
Really, yes, I want to feel my feelings. Why we are so uncomfortable with what other people feel is different for everybody, but for me, yeah, I probably lost a couple of friends over that back in the day when I went through that, because I was like, please stop doing that to me. I need to be allowed to cry at this moment, because I don't like to cry in front of people, but I wanted to feel safe. It's about feeling safe.
Yeah.
If you start acting like I should cheer up, I'm not going to feel safe to share that information with you.
Yeah.
So,
So what, Kim, what suggestions do you have for the amputee community about how to advocate for themselves, how to not kind of brush it under the rug, so to speak, when someone says something that's toxic or that might be a microaggression or that is minimizing? What suggestions do you have as an amputee to give voice to or address those issues in a way that maybe, is tactful, that doesn't burn bridges with your friends? What suggestions do you have?
Well, I wrote down, like, you want to be seen as who you are, not just your leg or your arm or your disability. But you can say, I prefer for you to see me as who I am, what you've always seen, not just this. I laugh, I'm funny, I'm intelligent, I have a brain, I lost my leg, not my brain, which I say all the time. I'm going to make a shirt. But, just because it's easy. In the beginning, I would break down and cry when somebody tried to make a joke, because they're just trying to be friendly. They're just trying to figure out how to talk to me. I get that. I totally get that. But there will be a point when you'll have to either politely correct them in a different way or find a different way of saying it, because everybody's different. Some people will be very sensitive and very offensive that you found well, I was just trying to be nice. I know. I get it. Trying to be nice, but I need you to do this. You need to explain to them what you want out of that. And from this point forward, please don't say that. Or let's rephrase it a different way.
Yeah, so one thing I'm hearing you say is we want to first feel what you're feeling and be okay having those feelings, but to be willing in some ways to teach the person who said something or acted in a way that was offensive. I can tell you, as someone who is a supporter of someone with limb loss and limb difference, I sometimes worry that I might say something offensive or just not be aware of it. And that is just the nature of being a human being, right? It doesn't mean that there's malicious intent there. But I think one thing that you're saying, Kim, is be willing to teach people. Yeah.
I do see a lot of posts on some of the Facebook groups, and I totally get where they're coming from when they get rude back. But instead of doing that, realize it's not about you.
Yeah.
They personally don't know how to handle you themselves.
Yeah.
So I had to learn a lot. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD by the 4th out of 5th time that I had cancer.
Wow.
Because I was like, I can't talk to anyone anymore. They just think it's like I have a COVID or the cold or something.
Right.
We didn't have COVID. It's like, please stop treating this like it's not a big deal, because to me, having it come back again and again, it was really wearing on me.
Yes.
And because it happened over and over again. And and I try to explain, this is what I live with daily. It's not something I can put in the past or forget about.
Right.
But it's how I handle it now at this moment, because I know I didn't always handle it correctly.
Yeah.
I had to learn a lot, educate myself a lot on trauma.
Yeah.
I study that. I hope to be a someday. But, I had to learn, like I said, doctors, our community, our society in general does not know how to deal with it. Even doctors, like GPs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have you fill out that little thing, and it's like, are you happy? And are you this? And are you that? Are you
Where are you on a scale from 1 to 10 with your smiley face? That kind of thing. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that doesn't even begin to touch what somebody may be going through, because these are like stereotypical questions that don't apply to everybody.
Yeah. So I think, and I see Carl's got his hand up, so maybe he'll share a story with us. But Carl, you can come off of mute. But I think, Kim, another thing I'm hearing you say is go beyond the superficial questions, right? We just don't want to say, how are you doing today? So I'm fine. Okay, everybody says I'm fine. But what does fine really mean? Have a more sincere conversation. Okay, Carl, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Kim, I think what she's saying is it's okay to be vulnerable, like everybody expects you to be this hero or be able to overcome all these obstacles. And guess what? Those obstacles are really challenging, and sometimes you're not, strong enough to overcome them and you need help. And it's hard to be vulnerable, but that's really, that's what's impressive, Kim, that you're able to be vulnerable and you're able to speak your mind about how you really feel. It's taken me 3 years to figure that out.
So. It took me 15, Carl. So.
And don't you think, Carl and Kim, that sometimes those images of the big, tough, strong amputee kind of make you feel like you can't be vulnerable because you got to be like tip-top shape, walking around like the Hulk, unbothered. And sometimes that can, like I said, set an unreasonable expectation.
Well, Kim had to be tough,
Yeah.
She was a single mom.
Right.
31, and then she was fighting cancer, and she had to put on this
very
strong
good
face
point.
for her child. And sometimes that's hard, to put that up.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Yeah.
So thank you for.
I want to point that out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carl. I realized after so many years, because I had trauma before that, dealing with being a single divorced parent, coming from a lot of dysfunction in my family and stuff, and I overcame that. And then here comes cancer. So that's why they said, oh, you didn't just deal with one tragedy or trauma, you dealt with
multiple
ton of it, and it all hit you all at once. So we're all dealing with something before the amputation or before the cancer diagnosis. So how it hits us when we unexpectedly go through something like that can wipe us out, literally wipe us out, emotionally, physically, mentally. I try to do, and you don't want to be trying to talk that. At the time, it's like, I don't even want to hear your positive comment at this point. But you get to a point where you do have to do the work. But I always say, even when I mentor, I always say, if you feel you need it, go to see a counselor, even once, because that will help you.
Yes. Has anyone else, and I'd love, Nick, if you could read Jamie's comment there for us, has anyone else had an experience where, someone has said something that's been offensive to you, or there wasn't an accommodation and you didn't feel comfortable speaking up? If you'd like to share, it'd be very helpful for folks who watch our recordings to know that they're not alone. But Nick, if you don't mind sharing what Jamie had to share.
Sure. So Jamie said, I had a supposed friend make a general comment around a group of friends, and I was in another room, but heard him say anyone that has to rely on a walker or a cane should think twice about when and where they should be in public. Wasn't the first time he commented about disabled people of any way, so no longer talk to him and others.
Yeah. That's rough.
That's terrible.
And it's a shame that in 2025, almost 2026, there are still people walking around holding those beliefs, and it's sad, but it's also a reality. I can assure you most people don't share that belief. But I think the larger question I would have asked, first of all, if I were there, I would have come unglued like this Chihuahua Carl over here. And I would have, ripped into them. I guess that's the advocate heart of me coming out, which is the question is, why is the public not an accommodating place for you to go out wherever you want? And then I would have dropped a couple F-bombs in honor of my grandmother, who I've spoken about a lot. But that's a shame. People say, and the fact that someone feels comfortable enough to say that in public is also a shame.
Another thing, a quick thing, if they're minimalizing your disability, I have in the notes here on the website, you can say, I know you mean well, but this is my real daily experience. It's not something that can be brushed aside. That in itself, might be something that would be the appropriate thing to say back without getting offended.
Yes, Kim, repeat that again. Finger snaps for that. I would love that mantra. So repeat that again for as a takeaway tip for someone who has an offensive comment said to them. What do you recommend they say?
I know you mean well, but this is my real daily experience. It's not something that can be brushed aside.
I love that. Very, very nice. And it's, I think it indicates hopefully they meant well, but even if they didn't, you don't want to start off with an argument. So you still start out that way, and emphasize that is your daily life, and we don't know how anyone lives or what their lives are like. We don't want to assume either, Any other comments, or anyone else would like to share? Maybe they've been told something offensive or they've experienced something offensive and how they dealt with it or didn't. Any other comments? Because I've got more questions if we don't have any more comments. We'll give it a moment.
The same person has also made comments about deaf people and mocked them because they couldn't speak. So it's not just physically handicapped, it's everything.
That's a shame. That person, you don't want to wish ill on anyone, but that person will learn sometimes the hard way, and probably the hard way.
My college roommate my sophomore year.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Jamie. And so Jamie, how did you handle it? Did you ever ask the RA to step in or ask someone to?
Well, no, it was only the sophomore year, but I didn't have any of my disabilities, and he really didn't do it back then.
I see.
This has been since college.
Ah.
The first time he made a comment like that was 20 years ago after I had spine surgery.
Oh my gosh.
And a guy came in a wheelchair and he made a comment, and I said, "That's supposed to be me." So I stood up and walked out.
Yeah.
I seen him mock one of his friend's ex-husband because he was deaf.
That's a shame. And
he made this comment recently.
And Kim, how would you suggest, in some ways, I think, Jamie, what you do by walking out is you set a boundary. I'm not going to engage with that person. I'm not allowing you into my space and into my peace. And Kim, based on what Jamie has described here, is that a suggestion that you would have? Or that maybe sometimes you have to set the hard boundary and just not allow those people into your life?
Right. Yes. You have to remember that everybody's on a different social level with you. I have one or two close friends, super close friends, but not everybody's at the level of friendship. It could be acquaintance, it could be social. We have friends that we laugh with, we have friends we cry with, we have friends that we shop with, all different levels of friendship. And yes, I've had to put boundaries, and if those boundaries keep getting stepped on, then I've had to say, I'm sorry, but this isn't working out and I need to move on. And that may not be what somebody wants to do, because that person could have been in your life for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And you were used to it. But once you realize something new about yourself and that is not a boundary you want to let cross anymore, then you have to be able to. Sometimes doing the right thing means doing it alone and standing alone. But which I've done many times. But I feel that setting boundaries is not just to tell them what they can and cannot do. It's also to protect yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
I've told him, I've known him for over 30 years. I also went to junior high with him, and then we didn't go to high school together. But about 3 weeks ago, Thursday night at 9 o'clock, his friends were out in the backyard, and only like a quarter mile away, so I could walk there. But they sent me a message at 9 o'clock at night with a picture of them sitting out having drinks, and said, "The gang's all here, why don't you come over?" You could tell they had been there for hours.
Yeah, so totally dismissive.
Later, I just responded and I said, "Thanks for the invite, but I don't want to be an afterthought anymore.
Right.
Hope you guys enjoyed the night."
Yep.
They responded and said, "We try to text and call you all the time to go out with us, and you never respond." And my last response, and I never heard back from him, was, "Well, this is the same phone number. I got this text. I've never gotten anything else.
Yep.
Enjoy. Goodbye."
Yep. Classic gaslighting and trying to put the burden on you. Well, we tried to. No, you didn't. I've got my phone. It works for everybody else except you, right? It's a shame that those things happen. And it's a hard thing to go through when you have to set a boundary, but sometimes you do, and to let people out of your life. My grandma, who was, as I said shared before, was a bilateral amputee, and a social worker for a long time, decades. She would say, you don't get to choose what happens to you all of the time, but you do get to choose how you respond. And I think, Jamie and Kim, that's kind of applicable here, which is most of the time, in fact, I venture to guess all the time, you don't choose an amputation, right? You might choose the surgery because the alternative is worse. But I don't think many people would voluntarily enter into this lifestyle. But despite that happening to you, you have the ability to choose how you respond. And Kim, that's kind of something that resonates in your recent blog about, how you interact with people, what you say, whether you set a boundary, how you advocate and educate folks. You choose to respond to that lifestyle a certain way. True?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even in addition, because sometimes I'm single, I live alone, I have a disability. I don't like to say I'm disabled. I like to say I have a disability, but that's not who I personally am. And even at church or social gatherings or whatever, when I feel like I'm the only non-disabled person or disabled person in the room, I feel like I'm still not always included because I've heard things like, well, we didn't invite you because we didn't know if you could climb or do this. So I said, let me.
Oh, I think we lost the audio there for a minute. Am I the only one who can't hear, Kim? Okay,
yeah,
there
I
you go.
saw it come on that somebody muted me or whatever, but
Oops, sorry.
I don't think it was on purpose. But I always say, let me decide what I can and cannot do and how we can do that. That's too much for you to fold up a wheelchair and put it in the back, or let me sit in the front seat versus the back seat because it's not comfortable for me or whatever. I just won't go. I mean, I will make other plans, not going to hold myself back.
Yeah. I think it goes back to that point we spoke about earlier, Kim, which is the overgeneralization. Like we will tell you what you can do, or we think this is what should happen to you without considering your unique input or your unique experience. Now, on this point, your more recent article for Amplitude magazine talks about your experience with Medicaid. And what I have found in talking with clients or potential clients and others in the community, supporters or potential donors, is there's this blanket assumption that if you have experience in amputation, that Medicaid pays for all your bills. You're disabled, Medicaid pays for it. And many people who are not having your lived experience just assume that that's the case. That's not the case. And that's what you talked about in your more recent Amplitude magazine article, correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, give us kind of a preview of that article, and then we want you all to go look at it and read it because she gets paid for it. Make sure the clicks go up and the shares go crazy so she gets more gigs. Okay, but give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of that article.
Oh, well, writing about, Medicaid cut me off at the end of May, so I no longer have that, and I found out that the Dexcom 7 that I have been wearing is covered by Medicaid, which now they want to charge me full price for. So I had to call them and make arrangements, and now they still send me a bill for it. Yeah, it's like it's two departments not connecting or something. But now I also got a letter saying that my Medicare Part B, they would no longer pay for it, that I have to pay the $185. And both times I asked them why, and they said, well, you can make above the government guidelines. And I go, you, the government, pay my Social Security disability income. So how in the world? See, there's some injustice right there.
Yeah.
I can go into politics. I don't want to offend anybody, but it was frustrating. And now my income is down because of that. So then I had to file paperwork to lower my rent, and they still took out too much for this month as of today. So then I filed a reimbursement form and changed things in their system. And it's just one thing.
It's a full-time job just to get the medical coverage accurate. I mean, it's the best it can be.
I don't have the money to replace a vehicle, but getting a ride where I live, I can't just take the bus to do grocery shopping and laundry at the laundromat. I mean, how am I going to carry all that stuff? People don't think about those issues. They think, well, why not?
Right.
And I'm like, you try this. Let's trade bodies for a moment, and you see how you feel when you do it. It's always easier for them to say that because they don't have to do it. And I don't want to be classified as, well, you live in poverty, so you got to take what you can get. Mm-hmm. No, I don't. No, deserves to be treated that. You should not make it a socioeconomic status thing. You know, no one should be treated that way. Not me, not anyone. I live where there's a lot of elderly people who are now suffering because they're getting the same notices that I am. Many people are being called off from the EBT, food stamps, all that. I live alone, so I've always, even as a divorced single mom, I was always on a budget, always did everything, and I still do that. But when the government keeps taking and taking and taking, and I almost have nothing to live on, you know, luckily I have to be thankful I haven't had to pay car insurance since February.
But because you don't have a car.
So anybody want to give me a vehicle that is not 20 years old and doesn't already have 200,000-300,000 miles on it, that would be great. But, you know, I wanted to continue doing the accessible travel writing, but also I have the ability that if I had a vehicle, I could go around and help other people get rides and things, because I know what that feels like to constantly be told no or rejected, or can you wait 3 days until I have time or whatever, and you get to the point where you just don't ask, and they're like, well, can you just order it from Walmart or whatever? Yeah, after the fees, I've just wasted a lot of money. I mean, like, those groceries are free, but by the time you add the fees on to be delivered or have someone pick it up, it's like I just spent another $20.
Or hope that they get you the right thing in your delivery, which sometimes doesn't happen. So your article, Kim, go ahead.
I said, when I share that in what I'm writing, I'm being very, very vulnerable.
Yes.
But I want people to know it's not just about me. It's about everybody. Everybody struggles with something on some level.
Yes.
And we need to have grace for that.
Yeah. And so, Kim, when I read your article, you know, there's no like quick solution. There's no like, here, fill out this form and your insurance is back. This is really more about sharing your frustrations and your struggles, which are hard to read about, but also not uncommon. And that's kind of the part of your journey as an advocate and as a blogger, is to share your story and get more people paying attention to it. Quick thumbs up if you've experienced something similar to Kim, where Medicaid has gone down or insurance didn't cover something, or you had to worry, am I going to pay my insurance or something else? It'd be helpful for us to know. I see some hands going up. Folks are not alone. And you know, not to plug Amputee Aid too hard, although that's part of my job, we help. That's what we do. We are here to help, okay? So we don't want everyone worrying about whether they can pay for their gas to get to their doctor's appointment, or if they need a little bit of extra for food, or they need to help with their copay to get a new prosthetic. That is why Amputee Aid exists, and there are other nonprofits that do what we do. Kim, I already told you, girl, you're on my vision list for Adopted Amputee. I want a peer-to-peer fundraiser to get you a car. And once I have a mission, you all know back there, I stick with it. So hopefully we're going to get you one. I would like to turn to Carl in a moment, but Kim, I'd like to wrap up on you and see if anyone has any questions for Kim about her experience, about her process of blogging, how she got involved. You can raise your hand. And I want to encourage all of you, if you're thinking about asking a question, if you haven't already done so, share your contact information with Kim. I'm sure her being able to harvest your stories and your experience would be helpful and make those blogs. They're already amazing, but we'd like to share your stories in there as well. You're welcome to either share them or Kim put her contact information in the chat. You can reach out to her individually. And if I'm not seeing any questions for Kim, I want to thank you for being my special guest, my and Chihuahua Carl's special guest, and sharing your perspectives and your method around blogging and some of the things that you've learned, and also your takeaways about A, advocating for yourself, B, feeling your feelings, C, teaching people who might say something unintentionally offensive, but D, also knowing when you set your boundary and move on, to not let people interrupt your peace. I think those are all really important things for people to hear, and they're reassuring. They're reassuring. So read that blog on her page. The information is in our chat. Read her article and like and share it on Amplitude Magazine. And Kim, thank you so much for sharing your story and participating today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for that. And Carl, in the time that we have left, I would love for you to share a little bit about how you're doing from your surgery. Hi, there he is. As I said, just as adorable as Chihuahua Carl, but not quite, but more talkative. Share a little bit about how you're doing now, and we're going to preview our discussion for next week on all things osseointegration surgery. So, Carl, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, real quick before we dive into that, Kim, you're amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for stepping in today and telling us about your blogging and about your story. That was interesting, and yeah, I mean that's a lot. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
And Jamie, geez, go find that guy and hit him over the head with your cane immediately.
We hold on. I don't know if we have bail money for that. Be careful, but that's not legal advice.
Yes.
Okay.
I will send you bail money. Yeah.
He said it.
Set some boundaries with your cane next time. Yeah. So yeah, osseointegration surgery was, as expected. A couple first days were painful, but I had a lot of people helping me. My wife, my friends, even some of our coworkers, drove me up to New York and back. It was a really interesting week so far. But I'm feeling really good. I got outside today. I could share a lot more. I have photos. I know you posted some videos.
Yes.
But, the whole process has been actually better than expected.
That's good. And Carl, you mentioned the video. So if you are not following us on social media, please go do TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I did share one of Carl's videos a few days after his surgery, kind of giving us an update. We have more to share. And I have to say, the one about 24 hours after, when you were still on oxy medication, you are much more cheerful and coherent now than you were then. We will share that as well. So you'll get a little sneak peek of some of the post-op recovery. I'm really glad to see you because, as I said, you'll be surprised. He's very cheerful now. 24 hours after, a little bit more questionable though, Carl, just being honest.
I looked at the 3 videos. It was like day 1, 2, and 3. It was night and day.
Yes.
Day 1 and 3. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll share those on social, and we will share them next week as well. So we have a lot to talk about for how the surgery went, whether the costs are kind of aligning with what we budgeted, based on our podcast and a prior webinar. Whether it matched your expectations. And so we'll be sharing all of that live next Wednesday at 2:00 Eastern time, right here on Zoom. Carl will be back seated here. So you'll be able to see what the osseointegration portion looks like, and we'll be able to answer questions. That means for all of you, if you're joining us live or you're watching our YouTube recording, send us your questions or come ready to ask them because Carl is going to be no filter, right? You're going to be on the hot seat here, and I don't want to answer for him, but I think he's willing to answer any question that we lodge his way, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, bring your questions. I know it's a big topic, and trust me, I tried finding information on osseointegration. It's just not out there. There's nobody telling the story, or there's a lot of success stories a year or 2 later, but they're very short. There's nobody asking questions. So this will be, in my opinion, the first time we can document something where people can ask questions, get the real answers, and
Yes.
make a decision if they want to try it for themselves.
Yes, and if you don't have questions yourself, but you know people who are considering this surgery or who have asked about it, maybe you've seen it on support groups or through friends or anything like that, recommend they come too, or gather their questions and send them in. We want to make sure that we use that time wisely and that we can get as much information out, at least from Carl's perspective, as possible. And kind of closing out on one of Kim's points, we don't want to overgeneralize, right? And everyone's stories and experiences are different. So Kim, thank you for sharing yours today. And Carl, you'll share your perspective and your experience next week. So until next Wednesday, 2:00 Eastern time, right here on Zoom for another session of Life Amplified. I hope that you all have a wonderful week. Thank you again for joining us. And as I said, starting out, Google Temptations. It was the 3rd of September, and you'll know why I've been thinking about that song all day long. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Right.